Welcome to Recruitment Roundtable. It's an interactive session for Vista leaders. I'm your host, Andy King, Senior Training Specialist with AmeriCorps Vista, and I'll be presenting as well. I'll be joined by Kat Holst, who is serving as an AmeriCorps Vista leader with the Literacy Coalition of Central Texas. We'll hear from Kat a little later in the session. So first, let's take a look at our outcomes for the session. By the end of it, we hope that you will be able to identify the stages of member recruitment, describe appropriate ways Vista leaders can support the recruitment process, and then generate some effective practices for your high priority recruitment areas. And you'll do that by collaborating with other leaders in small groups. So in addition to that, we will have some time for your questions at the end, and then I'll invite you to complete a webinar evaluation. So we'll start by quickly looking at the 6 stages of member recruitment, and then we'll look at some appropriate roles that leaders can play in each of those stages. But before we get to that, I want to touch on a couple of things that support Vista leader success and the role that you play within your project. So it's essential that a Vista leader has an effective working relationship with their supervisor, as well as with the other Vista supervisors throughout the project. And another thing important for leader success is clarity about the leader's role, so that everyone from the project director to site supervisors to your Vista members and you yourself as a leader, that you all have the same expectation. Leaders do play important roles in the recruitment effort, and it's really important that everyone understands what those are. There are many ways that leaders can support recruitment efforts, but there are some things that are really off limits to leaders. So leaders are not permitted to create Vista positions or to create VADs, and they're also not the ones who can decide which Vista candidates get chosen to serve. All right, so with those caveats out of the way, let's take a look at the 6 stages of the Vista recruitment process. And I'll mention that this was originally devised by a group of Vista leaders, and AmeriCorps has continued to build on their work, and this now is the recruitment framework for the AmeriCorps Vista program. So the 6 stages, or steps as they're labeled here, are plan, market, screen, interview, select, and engage. These aren't always discrete steps. Often there is some overlap among them. You might find yourself straddling a couple of stages at once, and you might circle back to previous stages before completing your entire recruitment. So now let's look at each stage and see how leaders can be involved in each one. So during the planning stage, you work with your supervisor to develop a plan that includes the number of vistas and the type of positions that you'll need to fill, as well as the skills needed. And of course, all of that is based on the VADs that have already been created and approved. In the planning stage, leaders often work back from the date that members will be starting, and then help with drafting timelines with specific deadlines for each step of the process. Leaders can develop recruitment messages for social media and advertising. They can also help draft the opportunity listings that go in My AmeriCorps, and those are the ones that the supervisor will actually finalize and post through eGrants. So that's it for planning. Now in marketing, the Vista leader roles can vary, really based on the needs and the positions. Leaders often help with creating and then implementing a marketing plan. You and your supervisor will likely discuss and determine what the marketing strategies will be. Those often include digital and social media, maybe print media, other advertising, as well as outreach strategies that might include community-based or, say, college campus outreach activities or events. Leaders often are really good about thinking creatively about the target audience and then tailoring the recruitment messages so that they can attract a variety of potential applicants. And leaders are pretty well positioned to see quickly which of those efforts are working and which ones aren't. So then they can update the marketing plan to make the future efforts more effective. And also, leaders can have an important role in searching for and identifying applicants who are already in AmeriCorps, in My AmeriCorps, right? And they've created an application in the system, but for some reason they have not yet applied to your position. So there's a way to search and find applicants who have the skills and interests that align with your project. And then you as the leader can certainly reach out to them, invite them to explore your opportunity and invite them to apply. So in the screening stage, you and your supervisor will probably determine which criteria you'll use to screen for eligibility and suitability. So it's leaders who are often monitoring the recruitment work basket, sending out acknowledgments to applicants as they come in, and then performing some preliminary screening of those applications. It's appropriate for leaders to provide applicants with more information about the role and to answer their questions. So you can follow up, clarify, document any application concerns, and then you can conduct screening interviews, and your supervisor will then release anyone who's not selected for a full interview. During the interview stage, leaders are likely reviewing applications with an eye toward identifying applicants that they would recommend to the supervisor for a full interview. Once the supervisor has approved a list of applicants that will be interviewed, then it's appropriate for the leader to schedule those interviews and participate in them as well. And usually at the end of the interviews, leaders are able to share their observations on the applicants with their supervisor and any recommendations that they might have. During the selection phase, leaders can work with their supervisor to recheck the eligibility of the top candidates and, again, provide any input they have about them. And their supervisor will ultimately handle the official selection duty, right? So they will make the decision, make offers, complete the recommendation form and e-grants after the candidate accepts the position. Supervisors also need to notify applicants who were not selected, right? So, they're the official decider, the supervisor, so they give all of that official communication. So we have in our process this step 6, which we call engage. And this is the period between the time when an applicant gets selected and the time they actually start as a Vista member, right? So between the selection and start date, you as a leader have a really important role in keeping the candidates engaged. So this could include a lot of things, but usually it's communication and communicating often with them on things like what to expect during their onboarding and orientation process, providing them with information about the organization or the community where they're going to be serving. And leaders are usually in a good position to help members with, very practical needs like finding housing, understanding their benefits, just getting the lay of the land, and other kind of really practical matters. So if it's an option, you might think about inviting the individuals who are selected to meet up for, say, a virtual lunch or coffee so that you can get to know them and start building your relationship with them even before they, officially start. These kind of things might seem small, but they can help prevent candidates from simply disappearing. All right, so I know that was kind of a quick overview of roles that leaders can play. So now we're just going to take a quick minute to engage you in a little quiz. So you see the poll has popped up on your screen. The question is, which of the following are not appropriate tasks for Vista leaders? And please select all that apply. The choices are create a Vista positions for the project, draft opportunity listings, acknowledge an application in My AmeriCorps, check eligibility of an applicant, and notify an applicant that they've been selected. So let's see, it looks like about half of you have submitted. After you check the boxes for your answers, be sure you click submit so that your answers rather get recorded. And I would really like to have everybody respond if you could. All right, looks like most people who are going to respond have responded. So we'll go ahead and, a couple more coming in. So Jeff, I'll give you 5 more seconds and then we'll go ahead and close that poll. And we don't have to publish the results, but it looks like most everybody is done responding, and it looks like you were able to identify the two tasks that were not appropriate, and that is creating the Vista positions for the project, which was option A, and then option E, notifying an applicant that they have been selected. So again, as a reminder, those are tasks that have to be done by the supervisor or the project director. So for all of those who got those right, good work. All right, so now it's time to hear from one of your Vista Leader colleagues. It's my pleasure to introduce Kat Holst, who, as I mentioned, is an AmeriCorps Vista Leader with the Literacy Coalition of Central Texas in Austin. Kat joined Vista after completing her service with Peace Corps, where she served in southern Morocco from 2017 until 2019. And there she served as a youth development volunteer. In terms of recruitment, Kat helped to facilitate multiple English and life skill camps during her Peace Corps service, and she was a regional coordinator for an international creative writing competition, which involved some 365 participants and 54 volunteers from Morocco alone. She's nearly finished her first term as a Vista Leader, and lucky us, she's going to be returning for a second year. So Kat, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Andy. I'm excited to have the opportunity to share some of my best practices for recruitment today. So let's get started with the planning stage of recruitment, then go into communication and tools for making the process easier. Regarding the planning stage, I want to talk about the sorts of preliminary information you'll want to gather. Start with what your role in the recruitment process will be. What exactly does your supervisor expect of you, and what are your responsibilities as a recruiter? Where do those duties intersect, and how much will you be collaborating? What are the tools at your disposal, and how do you use them? What are your avenues for marketing? Who are your partnerships? How is your organization tracking applicants as they move through the process? If you discover your organization hasn't been tracking recruitment, start. Keeping track of your recruitment is integral to the sustainability and the success of your efforts. You can look at past recruitment trends to determine where your gaps are, and knowing your gaps lets you set goals. Have you been unable to attract local applicants? Do you need to use more inclusive language in your postings? What can you update or enhance? Keep in mind, different cities and organizations may be easier or more difficult to recruit for, and use smarter goals to make sure both your targets and hoped for outcomes are realistic. Throughout the entire recruitment cycle, you should be communicating closely with your supervisor. Schedule a weekly meeting if you can, and plan to set communication expectations in order to have a good working relationship. I'm not an intermediary, which means my direct supervisor and I work with about 9 supervisors across 7 organizations. All our strength and success as a team is in direct correlation to our communication. For each supervisor, we learn their preferred means of communication, whether it's email, Zoom meeting, or direct phone call. We also establish a backup person to contact in case there's an emergency and they can't be reached, and adjust our communication style as needed. We base the frequency of our communications off of where we are in the recruitment cycle. I generally send a weekly update once the position is posted, with calls as needed in between. Finally, we set deadlines. Creating accountability from the very beginning is crucial. Providing our supervisors with a calendar that includes specific dates, their deadlines as well as ours, that shows how each task is necessary in order for the next task to happen, leads to a tangible outcome for all of us and means no task feels unnecessary or superfluous. This is an example of the calendar we send to supervisors. My direct supervisor and I request input on dates and recruitment strategies, and we utilize calendar invites and email reminders to help all of us stay on task. Now, I understand there are a lot of moving parts in recruitment, and there are even more if you're working with multiple supervisors or recruiting for multiple roles. It can be really difficult to stay organized or even feel overwhelming sometimes. Don't forget, recruitment is an evolving process. It requires constant reevaluation for best practices and strategies, and you shouldn't be afraid to streamline as you go. If you discover at any stage that something isn't working or have ideas for improvement, talk to your supervisor about it. A great way to open those discussions is with data. So I want to share two of my favorite free tools that help me with recruitment. Number one, Airtable. We use Airtable for our entire recruitment cycle, from setting early deadlines through to onboarding. Airtable functions similarly to Excel in that you can create formulas. For our recruitment deadlines, we have it provide us with approximate dates based off of member start dates. Once I input my applicants, I can view where they are in the recruitment process and drag and drop them from one stage to the next. Airtable allows attachments, so I can make sure their screening notes and applications are all in one place. Each tab up at the top can be linked to and talk to other tabs, and I can expand a record so that I can see all of its information easily. And because I can track as much as I'd like to, I can narrow down what I see using views, so I only see the information I need at a given time. I'm able to both email individual records to team members, as well as set specific tasks for them to complete. Number two, Canva. We use Canva for marketing materials like social media posts and infographics. Canva has a variety of templates you can build from, and it's pretty easy to change color themes to match your organization or the organization you're recruiting for. I utilize impact stories and statements from former members, the VAD, member duties, and the position description to create marketing copy. Finally, I wanted to share my top tip in each recruitment stage. For planning, it's reflect. Reflect back on your own experience and try to remember what it was like to be an applicant. Honestly, use this mirror approach for every step of the process. It will provide you with a lot of insights. What do you wish communication had looked like before and after you were selected? What was most important to you when choosing where you applied? Why did you choose one position over another? For me, it came down to the opportunity listing. If that didn't catch my eye immediately, I moved on. As a result, I put a lot of energy into working with supervisors to improve the way postings are written. As for marketing, start in-house. Be sure not to forget your organization's own social media outlets. You never know who's been keeping a close eye on your organization or who might share your post with a friend. Our best applicants have been those who already wanted to work with the organization. In addition, don't overlook your organization's own client population. They already have a stake in the project and in the community you're serving. My biggest tip for screening is to be human. Remember what it was like for you when someone made contact. Where would you have wanted to know more? I prefer to treat my screenings as an open discussion. I kick us off by laying out what I'd like to talk about and ask the candidate to start where they feel comfortable. I make sure they feel safe asking questions. I also make a habit of reaching out to applicants who might have weaker seeming applications. Just because a person isn't good at filling out a form does not mean they lack skills or qualifications. Effective written communication is something I know I can coach them on, so it shouldn't disqualify them. Now, with interviewing, you may or may not be a part of this stage. Either way, you've probably made notes on the candidates to help inform the supervisor's decision. So the tip here is to be aware. As you're making your notes, try to remember that you have implicit biases. We all do, it's nothing to be ashamed of, but taking time to become aware of your own shortcomings and working to overcome them will help make the recruitment process more equitable. We're leaders, not gatekeepers. Harvard has a great set of implicit bias tests you can take. We've added the link to the resource list in your packet. As far as selection goes, we know we aren't allowed to select or reject candidates, but in order to make my supervisor's life easier, I created a series of email templates she can use, which I keep up to date. There are 4 of them, and they're ranked with regards to interest in the candidate. Some simply say, thank you for your time, while others invite them to apply to other open AmeriCorps positions at our organization, or to apply later in the year. All of them invite the candidate to subscribe to our newsletter or to keep engaging with us in some way. And finally, for engagement, create an action outline. This is an area I could go on for a long time about. So instead, I'm going to share with you a snippet of our engagement calendar. This lays out the information I need to provide to incoming members by week, reminding me to draft emails, update resource presentations, send materials, and set up meetings. If we have any social engagement activities within our organization happening at the time, I'm sure to invite onboarding members to those as well. I hope you found something useful in what I had to say today. Thank you so much for having me, and it's been a pleasure to share with all of you. I'll go ahead and hand things back to Andy now. Thank you again.
All right, Kat, thank you so much. You've given us some great examples, and hopefully that gives everyone some ideas on how they can be supporting members, or member recruitment rather, at their own project. All right, so now we're going to give you an opportunity to collaborate with a few other leaders in a small group so that you can share examples of what works in your project or what challenges you've come across, and you can then become a resource for each other. So a little bit about the breakout activity. In just a minute, you'll see a list of the breakouts, and I emailed those to you earlier, so maybe you've already seen them. But the topics will appear on the screen, and you'll be able to choose the one that you want to join. We think that the ideal size for a breakout group is no more than 5 or 6 people. With more than that, it'll be hard for everyone to participate. So if you go to join a group and you see that there are already 5 people in it, see if you can join another one. When you join a group, go ahead and unmute your microphone, and if you like, turn your camera on so you can, just connect a little more personably with your colleagues. Recommend you start by introducing yourself, maybe saying where it is that you're serving. The tip to share time for talking and listening. That's so everybody has a chance to share their challenge or to offer solutions and ideas. The time is going to go by really quickly. We've only got about 20 minutes in the group, so we just want to make sure everyone has a chance. And then finally, I ask you to be prepared to share one thing that you learned during a breakout group so that once we're back in the main room, you can share that with everyone. And then just a little heads up about what to expect when we're going to come out of the breakout groups. You'll see a little notification up at the top of the screen that says there's 60 minutes left in the breakout. If your group is done talking, you can go ahead and click the button that says Leave Breakout Room, and that'll bring you back to the main session. Please be careful not to click Leave Meeting, otherwise you'll go all the way out and you'll have to start Zoom over again. And when you come back to the large group, again, you will be automatically muted. Okay, so here are the topics, and as I mentioned, you may have seen these already. So this breakout really is your chance to get ideas and solutions to whatever your biggest recruitment challenges are. And again, it's an opportunity for you to share whatever successes or suggestions or strategies that you have to offer to your colleagues. So these topic ideas are based on your responses when you registered for the session. First of all, we had a lot of people who mentioned the challenge of finding quality applicants. So we decided to set up 3 breakout groups for that. So 1, 2, and 3. Again, please try to balance out the number of people per group. Group 4 is going to look at the challenge of getting diverse applicants. Group 5, the challenges of recruiting in a rural site or some other location that happens to be challenging, maybe an undesirable area. Group 6 is for challenges around the living allowance amount or other benefits or housing concerns that your prospects might express. Groups 7 and 8 both will focus on applicant follow-through, or really the lack thereof, trying to keep your applicants engaged, and the problem of ghosting. Group 9 is going to look at issues related to the recruitment team. So whether that's communicating with supervisors, getting buy-in from them or others on the team, or just no one having time to actually work on recruitment. So that Group 9 sort of covers those kinds of challenges. Group 10 looks at process challenges, like how do you manage applicants, dealing with multiple applications, getting people to stick with deadlines, and those kinds of process management items. Group 11 will look at challenges brought on by the COVID pandemic, such as virtual recruitment, attracting people when they'll be teleserving, and just, managing everything remotely. And finally, Group 12 will look at challenges related to marketing and outreach, including things like having no budget to actually pay for marketing. So those are the topics. Hopefully you'll see one or two that are particularly appealing. You might want to remember the group number to make it easier to join, or if your first one is full, to go to your second one. And as a reminder, we will have captioning available in group number 6. All right, so in just a moment, you'll see the breakout room button appear. All right, and for those of you who are just re-entering, thank you very much for participating in the breakout session. I hope you got some valuable ideas. It looks like now most everyone is back, so we will go ahead and continue. So I'd like to get a sense of what it is that you discussed in your small groups, or really what was your biggest takeaway. So we're going to use the chat activity now. And remember earlier I said, what was the most important thing you learned? Well, here's your chance to share that. So, maybe it was an approach that you think might help you with your recruitment. It could be a policy, or, something that you didn't know about. Or, an idea that came from a leader that you had never heard of that you want to try. So using the chat and sending it to everybody, what is one solution or one idea that was discussed in your group that you think is great or that you would like to implement? And let's see a bunch of them coming in. A couple people I see mentioned using QR codes and kind of learning more about them or maximizing the use of them. Looking at adding incentives to the program as a way to attract more people. Looking at lots of different ways of communication instead of just a couple of channels, trying to use all the modes that are available. Housing. Housing is a big issue, and so it looks like if you are part of a university, offering housing or some type of housing benefit could be a possibility there. We know that sponsors who offer housing have a much easier time of recruiting, not surprisingly. Let's see, from the COVID group, using more frequent professional development sessions to keep members engaged, giving them spoilers for social engagement activities at the end of the session to help encourage them to attend. In the topic area of finding quality candidates, checking our biases, right? Make sure we're not missing out on quality folks because we are making assumptions based on our own perspectives. Lots of great ideas here. For rural communities, developing a central resource for housing options in the community so vistas can more easily and efficiently find housing. I know that's a huge issue in some communities. All right, using the phone, right? Building relationships with candidates before they get on board. Okay, so lots of ideas. I'm not going to read them all here, but those are a few highlights. I'm going to collect all of these and I'll put them together anonymously, and I'll share that after the session when we have the recording ready to go. So, all right, so thank you again for sharing those. We've got just a little bit to do before we wrap up. So before we go, I want to point out a few resources available on Recruitment. These are all available to download from the copy of the slides. At the very last page of that PDF has these all listed with a link to each of them. So first up are two that I put forward. First is the Vista Recruitment page on the Vista campus. You see a snapshot of it there. That is really the central resource for recruitment resources for the Vista program for leaders and supervisors. There's also a collection of resources or materials created by a group of leaders who participated in this thing called the Action Learning Challenge a few years ago. So they've put together several things that are pretty good, and in fact, they're the ones who came up with this, the initial idea for the recruitment stages that we use. Then there were three resources that Kat mentioned. First is Airtable, right, that she uses as a tracking tool, sort of the online spreadsheet. Canva, that's really sort of for graphic design and materials development for marketing. And then the implicit bias test from Harvard. So again, all of those are available, and you see the link in the chat where you can download the resource that has those listed. And just to do a quick recap, we looked at these few things during the session. First, you reviewed appropriate leader roles in each of the 6 stages of recruitment. You heard some practical recruitment advice and some resource suggestions from your fellow leader, Kat Holst. And then you talked with your peers about your most pressing recruitment needs, and then you shared what works for you. As promised, we have a evaluation form for you, a quick survey to give your thoughts about this webinar. It probably is already open in your browser window, but if not, we'll drop the link in the chat. There it is. Takes about 3 minutes to fill out. It's a great way for us to see what works with these. We are experimenting with different formats and whatnot. Also, Kat, I'm sure, would love to hear your feedback about what she shared, and I find your comments really helpful. So if you would, please, I'd really appreciate it. Take a minute or two after the session to fill that out. All righty. So it's time now for Q&A. We've got a couple minutes left, and I know we have at least one question, but if you still have questions, you can drop it into the chat and we will get to it. So the question that came in earlier was around selecting candidates or applicants rather in e-grants, and whose role is that? So that is a role that is specific to the supervisor or the project director, right? It needs to be an official staff person at the organization because they are really the ones who are able to commit to onboarding and hosting an individual as a Vista member for the year of service. So it's not, you as a member yourself are not authorized to make that kind of an offer, right? So you can't go into e-grants and dismiss people or accept them. That has to be the supervisor, the project director. And also, you're not able to send an email that says, hey, good news, you're in, we picked you, right? Because that notification is an official, it could be construed as an official offer, so that needs to come, again, from the supervisor. Let's see, just double checking to see if there are any other, yeah, so we have another question here. It says the current online application system does not support Opportunity Youth, which AmeriCorps said is a priority in hiring. Are there any plans to better serve and support individuals in poverty? The system itself, My AmeriCorps, is a barrier to youth in our underserved communities who may want to apply for positions. So we hear a lot of feedback, and we know that the system is woefully outdated. We are in the process of investing in a new system, and it's a multi-year process. It's been underway for a bit. You know, I'm not so directly involved in that, so I don't have many other details to share, but we do recognize that. And you know, the best thing that we can offer is to use whatever channels you can to attract, you know, to find and bring them, you know, bring those individuals to your awareness, and then to just make the time and sit with them and help them with the actual online application. It's not ideal, I know, but it's the system we have right now, and until we get the new one, that is what we're required to use. So there are, you know, a number of different organizations have come up with some creative ways to do that. Sometimes they'll do a little joint session where everyone's together. And they'll say, hey, you know, we're going to walk you through this, and maybe you could do a Zoom call, or you know, when it's safe to do so, invite people to come in to your organization and help them do that. So anyway, I hope that helps. And I see there's a couple of other comments in the chat about Facebook group, and then an interest in connecting with other leaders outside of this. So there is a link there to LinkedIn if you want to connect. All right, so those were great questions. I see I've gone a couple of minutes over. Before I let you go, I do want to invite you to our next webinar. It's coming up on Thursday, May 20th, and it's going to look at the ways that Vista leaders can strengthen and contribute to member onboarding. So we hope to see you there. I want to again thank our guest speaker, the amazing Kat Holst. Also thanks to Bethany DeSablin for her instructional design assistance, and our production team, Jeff Banas and Steve Gray. Thank you all for joining. This concludes our presentation.